Right, a couple things then. First of all, we left off on page 60 as best we can, and we'll see how it works. But if possible, I'd like to finish this project this week and start a new one next week. Because what that'll mean, and if we need 3 periods instead of 2, that's fine. But if we can finish the project this week, then we have 6 class periods before break. All right, next Monday and Wednesday, the following Monday, Wednesday, the following Monday, Wednesday. And I'd like to do one more project with you, get that done, and then we'll break. And then after we get done with Thanksgiving, come back and do the Swift stuff. All right, that's the plan at least. All right, so we left off, I believe, last time on around page 61. All right, that's what I've got written down on here anyway. So ideally, again, I'm having some problems with mine, but with yours, you now can go in there and you've got, so as it says, put the bullseye as close as you can to whatever, and the value of the slider and the target value. Is everybody there? All right, that's where I thought we left off last time. So again, if you're a little bit behind or whatever, you don't have to hand this in. I'm giving it to you. But what I'm going to do at the end of the semester is just look and see what people did. So I'll bring all the machines up myself when I come in here at the end of the semester and see what people did. All right. All right, so as it says under the rounds button, it says, if you press the hit me a few times, you will have noticed that the random number never changes. I'm afraid the game won't be much fun this way. So one of the things on the to-do list was to generate a random number at the start of each round, but we haven't worked with rounds yet. So the author says that when you think about it, there might be a few times in this game where you might want to be thinking about starting a new round. So what he gets to on the bottom of page 61 is he says, well, why don't we just come in there and add a brand new method that's called start round. And that's what you see on the bottom of page 61. Now, if we look at this, there are 3 lines in there. The first line says, create our target value, which should give us a random number between 1 and 100. The second thing, when we start a new round, we're putting the slider right in the middle. All right, so current value is 50. And actually, it's the next 2 lines. Then we're setting the slider to that current value. Does that make sense to everyone? So whenever you start a new round, that's what we're doing. So the author says what he'd like us to do then next is to come into our viewcontroller.m file, or the bullseye viewcontroller.m file. And then he says here, right below the view did load, let's add a new method. So I'm just going to follow his lead here. There's the view did load. And he wants us to add a new method right here. Called start new round. All right, and I'm just going to put in the same 3 lines that he shows right here. All right, so that's the new method. As you can see, my mouse is now highlighted. All right, so that's the new method that's called start new round. Now, if you turn the page over and you look on page 62, now look how view new load or view did load changes. View did load, for lack of better words, it's not main, but we really shouldn't be adding our own code inside of the view did load, other than possibly doing some initialization. Now what we're doing is in our view did load function, we've already got these 2 lines. We just put those 2 lines that you see right here, these 2 lines in view did load are now in here. And the advantage of moving them from here to here is now what we're going to be able to do is just call that routine from here. So again, what we're doing is we're being more modular, all right, in the way that we're doing it. So what we want to do is we want to say in here, self start new round. Okay, so please make that change and take a look up here. Notice what view did load now. That's calling the parent. And now this is going to call this. We can't just say start new round because we want that to react to the view controller itself. So it's self dot. And you may have noticed if you put in the self dot, all right, start new round is one of the things it'll show. It recognizes that. So as soon as the view loads, call this, which will set the target, set the current value, and set the slider. All right. Hopefully that made sense. And also they say then go into your show alert method, and after you did the alert view.show right here, again, call self start new round. So we did two things. All right, in our view did load, I guess I'll have to move it up, but since we put this here, now in our view did load, we got rid of the two lines of code that were in there yet before, and now it just says self dot start new round to call this, and then at the end of our show alert, we're doing the same thing. All right, and all I've done is I've just added the code on pages 61 and 62 in your book. Again, there's a lot of good material in this handout that I gave you. They do a pretty good job, I'm sure much better than I just did, on page 62 of kind of walking you through what's going on here. Then on page 63, the author says, you know, if you look up on the, look at I'm holding this up in the air. The author says, if you didn't create your own method, you'd have to put that code in there inline twice. And it's not that that's a lot of code. It's 3 lines. Putting it in there twice is 6 lines. But imagine that instead of 3 lines, it was 300 lines. And a lot of times that's what happens, and that's why there's a heck of a lot of bad code out there. And it's due to the fact that people sit there and they say, oh, I don't need to write a new method for that. It's just a couple lines of code. Then somebody else adds a couple more lines. Then somebody else adds a couple more lines. Now, instead of having a bunch of different methods or functions, you've got one method or function that's 1,000 lines long. And again, if you think that doesn't happen, you're wrong. Right? There's a boatload of code that's out there like that that people have just written poorly. All right. Plus, you can now look at the name of the that you're calling there, start new round, and hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Ideally, again, when you're running this, your code should be somewhat self-documenting, and this is doing a better job of making it somewhat more self-documenting. All right. All right, turning up to the middle of page 64. The author says, great, you figured out how to calculate the random number and how to store it in an instance variable, target value, so you can access it later. Now you are going to show that target number on the screen. Otherwise, the player won't know what to aim for. All right? So the author, again, tells you to go into the BullsEye viewcontroller.h file right here. All right? And so far, we've added one property, that property for the slider. Underneath it, we want to add another property. Now, if you're not real fond of typing, if you look up on the screen here, you know, what you can do if you want is you can highlight the whole line like this, and then do your Command C for copy and Command V for paste. You can put it in there like that, and then there's just a couple things to change. All right, so this is a UI label. And it's target label. So regardless of how you want to do it, please make the appropriate change to add this line right here in your BullsEye viewcontroller.h file. Now, after we do that, next, as they mentioned on the bottom of page 64, we're going to have to go back to our storyboard. All right? It says to select the label, the one at the top that currently says 100, then go to the connections inspector. Now, that might seem a little confusing, so if you watch me do it here, All right, so I'm going to go back to the storyboard, right there, when it feels like coming up. All right, so they say go back to the storyboard, so hopefully that's where everybody is. All right, it says select the label, the one that says 100. Well, mine says 50 right now. All right. So that's the target. Okay, then it says go to the connections inspector. You may or may not remember that. That's up here. Okay, so I highlighted right here, and then I'm going up right here to the last of those 6 different icons that you see. It's the one way on the right. That's the connections inspector. All right, once that's highlighted, I'm going to single click on it. Whoops, wrong. Single click on it like that. All right, not real much in there right now. I think you'd agree with that. All right, but what they want us to do is drag a new referencing outlet to the BullsEye view controller. So it says select the target label. Okay, so in other words, they want us to click right here where it says new referencing outlet. And they want you to click there with this highlighted, click there, hold down on the control key, and drag all the way down to your view controller. And when you do, a pop-up should come up, and one of the things that's in there should be target label. Remember to hold down on the control key when you're doing that. Oops. All right, and notice when I've done that, what pops up here? Target label and view. So again, I highlighted this, I went over here to the connections inspector, single clicked on it, then took my mouse, clicked here where it said new referencing outlet, held down on the control key, and dragged all the way down to the view controller. Then let go. Then when it comes up, I'm going to choose target label. All right, and if it worked, then when you go back and look in the connections inspector, it should say target label, BullsEye view controller. All right, so I've done it. If you tried and you say, well, I tried and that didn't work, then raise your hand. You've got to hold down on the control key after you set that up. So you click on that to highlight it. All right, then over here, you want to click in there. Oh, then all right, then you've done it. And if you weren't sure, you could remove it and do it again if you wanted to. Everybody else, that worked? All right. Next page then. Page 65. The author at the top of the page says you should be familiar with the process by now. So you've done all that stuff. Fine. Now, take a look at the middle of page 65. The author says, let's add a new method right below start new round. And it's called update labels. Just a couple things. And it may not seem like a big thing, but let's just talk about this. First of all, currently, the routine is called update labels. All right? And there's only one label being updated. You might say, well, why didn't you just call it update label? Because probably in the future, when you think about it, what labels might need to be updated? I mean, when I'm thinking about this, that one, that one, that one. Point is, there's more than one, right? So even though we just have one to start, we might as well call it update labels. And we're making this a method because there's a good chance that we might want to call this from more than one place. If you know you're only going to call a routine that's got 3 or 4 lines in it from one place, then whether or not you make it its own method or not is kind of up to you. But if you know there's a good chance that you're going to be calling something from more than one place, then it's always a good idea to make it into a new method. All right? And the author says that in here. So I'm going to go to bullseyeviewcontroller.m and just make that simple method right underneath the start new round. So there's start new round. All right. Now, if you could just stop for a second and please look up here. The author explains this later on, but you might look at that and go, oh, why can't I just grab target value itself? Why can't I just grab that target value? Why do I have to do this in a string with format? This isn't as forgiving a language as some of the other languages that we've used. In other words, would you agree that's an integer, the target value? Isn't that what we set up at the top? We set up as an integer? You can't set that to a text variable directly in this language. You might be able to do that in other languages. VB.net might let you do it. Some other languages might let you do it. And probably we could do a cast, but instead of that, what we're saying is, okay, I want you to take that target value, and I want you to create a string out of it. And that's what we're doing. So if you'd please key in those, 3 lines? 4 lines. On the middle of page 65. And again, the explanation that I just gave you is right underneath it. Yep, I have a mistake on mine. That @ sign should not be. Whoops. Should look like that. Okay, the @ sign should not have been in quotes. Pardon me?
I said, at the beginning when we first started doing this, you said, well, we're going to end up doing that. We're going to end up putting that.
Yes.
Inside the
In
quotes.
fact.
You said you would do it too.
Yep. Oh yeah. And I'll do it again too.
Yeah, we will.
All right. And if you turn over and look on page 66, the author says, now in view did load, we've already changed it to add start new round, but now we want to also say self dot, not slef, self dot update labels. Not dot, self update labels. All right. So they tell you to do that here and also do it at the bottom after show alert where we added the start new round. Again, self update labels. Does it make sense to people what we're doing here? Does the transition, the stuff that's happening here make sense? In other words, what we're saying is, let's look at the storyboard. All right. We just linked that up. So just, I could click off of it, but what we're saying is anytime that we're going to come in and you're basically going to start a new round, which means either at the beginning of the game or when you click hit me again, all right, you want this to update, you want this to update, and you'll want this to update. So all 3 of the labels that have numbers in them will want to update. Does that make sense? And that's all we're doing is we're telling it to do that. Again, remember, this is a stupid piece of software that only does what we tell it to do. And doesn't do what we don't tell it to do. So why don't you save it? And again, hopefully, we'll see if mine blows up or not. Yep, still is. Wish I knew why. Mine is still blowing up, but I will tell you that the one that I gave you, that one should not blow up. And ideally, if you run yours now, if you save and run yours, is yours working? Yeah. All right, so just move it, try to move the slider a little bit to the right. I think that's it. That's what it should do.
That should change, but it's saying.
Yeah, because well, your target value
We
is
got it at
8.8.
54. The target value is 58.
That's what it was, so that isn't changing.
So we didn't get it.
But you'll notice, ideally at least, is your round implementing?
No.
Or incrementing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on
Yeah.
round 5. Is your round incrementing?
It's not incrementing. He has it set to round 5. Yeah, you typed in round 5.
All right. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go up to about page 84 or something like that. And then after that, what they start talking about is polishing the game, making the interface prettier, etc. So my hope is we can get to that point by around somewhere around 4 o'clock. Okay? Then I'm going to give you the rest of the period that hopefully we can all try to catch back up. Okay? All right, looking on the handout that I gave you. All right, looking at the handout, there's a gray box that takes up half the page on page 67. The author says, "What's the difference between an action method and a regular method?" Nothing. They're both methods. All right, you can read the rest of that stuff as you get time. Then I don't know why, but the author in the middle of page 67 and the first 2/3 of page 68 starts to try to get you to buy his book. I don't know why, but that's kind of a sales pitch in here. So we're going to forget that's even there. And we're going to look at the bottom of page 68. And on the bottom of page 68, the author says, now hopefully you have both a target value and a way to read the slider's position. If that's the case, you can calculate how many points the player has scored. The closer they get to the target, the more points for the player. It says to calculate this, you have to see basically how far you are away. All right? And this is where the author just goes to great lengths. That basically what he says is, okay, if we go to our storyboard, let's just look at the actual program itself, because I think you all get this. If I go here to the storyboard, the idea is this. Okay, let's pretend for a second that I did this, and when I clicked to start, it said put the bullseye as close as you can to 75. So let's pretend that's our number. Okay, and we go right here. We think that's about in the middle. All right, and so in other words, well, we check it and we're at 74. So we're pretty darn close. All right, we're not quite there, but we're pretty darn close. So in other words, how many are we away from where we're looking at? We wanted to get to 75, we got to 74, so we're 1 away, correct? So looking at it that way, if ideally we can score 100 points if we're right on, we're 100 minus 1, so we're 99, we're 99. Does that make sense? And the author says it doesn't matter if you were looking for 75 and you got 74, or you were looking for 74 and you got 75, because either way you're 1 away. So he talks about doing the math, etc., and multiplying if it's a negative number, multiplying it by -1. But really all you want to do is you want to say this, right? Absolute value. All right? And that's what the author says here. If you look in the book on page 69 and 70 and 71 and 72 and 73 and 74 and 75 and the first all the way down to the bottom of page 76. In fact, if you look on page, I should say that, On page 75, notice what the author has here on the very bottom of page 75. It says change show alert to what's shown there. The difference is the absolute value of the target minus the current, and the points is 100 minus that difference. And then you give the message on the top of page 76. Can everybody see those three lines? The two on the bottom of page 75 and the one on the top of page 76. All right. Can you please add those to the top of your show alert routine? Okay. And I will do the same. And after you did that, you don't need the line below it where those we are replacing this message that's right here. If you look up on the screen here, we are replacing this message, these three lines, get rid of them, replace it just with this one. All right? So it should look like that when you get done. And you notice I've got an error because I didn't put a semicolon at the end of line 50. Okay. So save that, run it, and see if you do now, if your message changes to tell you how many points you've scored. Now, if you run it and you go, well, we did everything that you said, and ours isn't working, then my guess is, no, you didn't do everything I said. There's something in your code that's not the same as the other code. And what is it? It could be a lot of things. All right, that's why I gave you the actual code from the book up till this point, so you can take a look at it. You can compare yours if you want to. All right, with the actual stuff that's from the author. So we're on page 76. We're on page 76. The goal is that within the next 23 minutes, if we can, is to get to page 82. Everybody hear that? On page 82, that's basically if you get that far and your stuff works till that point, if it does, your game works. The stuff that's in the last 60 pages of the chapter is the author says, now let's go in there and let's pretty it up. So let's give it a pretty background, etc. So what I'd like to try to do between now and the next 20 minutes is get to that point on page 82. All right, and then after we get to that point, I'll give you the rest of the class period to try to catch up, and if you are caught up and it works, to just go on your own to try to polish the game. But what I'd rather do is have everybody to the point where hopefully you're all caught up. And since we have neither Zane nor Mike here today, all right, other Mike, since we don't have either one of them here today, I don't want to go too far. but I don't want to hold that against the people who came. So hopefully that'll give you the chance, if you're a little bit behind, to catch up, or if something isn't working, to catch up. And if it is working, you can go on at whatever pace you want to go on. And I will pick it up then on Wednesday on page 80. Does all that make sense? What I'm probably going to do at that point is I'm just going to grab the book's code. Since mine's blowing up and the book's wasn't blowing up, I'm just going to grab the code from the book. All right? Because ideally, if I keep changing that, it won't blow up. So again, I'm on page 76. And ideally, if your code is working to that point, as it says there, notice it says put the bullseye as close as you can to 7. All right? So let's assume right there that you put it and it ended up being on 12. Okay? So what 12 minus 7 is 5, right? 100 minus 5 would give you 95. That'd give you the 95 points. Does all that make sense? And again, you could change this any way you wanted to. They will talk about later, I think I mentioned this to you last week, that if you get it right on, so right there where it says, get the bullseye as close as you can to 7, boom, you get it on 7, you get a 100-point bonus. When you're within like 5 points or something like that, you get a 50-point bonus. But you could make any rules in here you wanted to make. All right? So keeping track of the player's score on the bottom of page 76. They want us to go back to BullsEye View Controller.m, where I am already, and they want us to go in and add underneath our other 2 variables that are at the top. All right, in our implementation section, we've already added current value and target value, but now we want to add another integer, and that will be score. Does everybody, and again, I'm not trying to talk down to you, I just want to make sure. Does everybody understand what these 3 variables here represent? Current value is where where you put the slider when you click hit me. Target value is what you're trying to get. And score is how close you got, but the idea is for every round we want to add, so if you play 5 rounds and you get 100 and a 90 and a 90 and a 90 and a 90, you wanted to say after 5 rounds that you're at 460 points. Okay, which is 100 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90 plus 90. All right, so that's what score is going to basically be doing. So we came in there and did that on the bottom of page 76, then turning it over to page 77. The author mentions here, it says, now show alert can be amended to update the score variable as shown. All right, so if I go in here and I go down to my show alert method, all right, it says if difference is negative, well, we shouldn't even have to worry about that. Difference should never be negative. Would everybody agree with that? Because we're using absolute value. So I don't even see where we would need to put that particular thing in there. All right, so we've already got the code that's shown in the middle of page 75. That's what I've got right here. Int difference equals the absolute value of target value minus current value. All right, again, if you look up on the screen here, does everybody agree with this too? Doesn't matter which of these you subtract from which. You can say absolute value of target value minus current value, or you can say current value minus target value. Doesn't matter. I mean, that's like saying the difference in the absolute value of this versus this. All right, that's 1 and that's -1, but the absolute value gives you 1 in either case. So it wouldn't matter which way we did it. All right, so keeping track of this total, and on the bottom of page 76 and jumping on to page 77 there, the author says, well, now we got to go into show alert after we figured out the points. All right, then we've got to add those points to our score. So I put in the line right here. So again, imagine that we're playing the game. We played 3 rounds. The first round we got a 98. The second round we got a 90. The third round we weren't that good. We got an 80. All right. This right here is points. That's points. That's points for round 1, points for round 2, and that's points for round 3. And score is going to be the addition of all 3 of these, which is that. Does all that make sense? We didn't do this. The game doesn't do it, but if for some reason we wanted to, we could have even gone over to our storyboard and we could have even let them know what their average score per round was. That wouldn't be hard to do, would it? You just have to take the points and divide it by the number of rounds they play. All right? I mean, there reaches a point where probably you say, you know, that would overload, that would give too much information to the person playing the game. Maybe they wouldn't really care.
Filling up this.
All right. But one reason that could be good is if you set this up that you could have 2 different players. That would be one way of seeing. You could check not only the total points, but you could see who's got the higher average score. So there's a lot of different uses you could potentially have for this. All right.
If you made a bowling game, you would want to have that average.
Yeah. Again, it depends on, you know, if I was doing something where I was doing test scores, something like that, I might want to have an average, or I might want to have a max or a min. I mean, here, you know, what the max is always going to be 100, right? It's always going to be if you're perfect. And you may or may not realize it, but you can't get a 0 the way that this is set up. Because what's the smallest number that's in here? 1. So that's the smallest you can get. If literally it said, what are you looking for? And you said 100, and you were down at the bottom and you got a 1, technically that would be what? 99, right? There's 99 difference.
Then you get 1 point.
You would get 1 point. So you always get at least 1 point no matter what you're working on. Now on the bottom of page 77 and all of page 78, the author talks about instance variables. So I'll let you read that on your own. It's good stuff. Turning up to page 79, about a third of the way down on the page, the author says, showing the score on the screen. It says you're going to do exactly the same thing you did for the target label. Hook up the score label to a property, all right, and put the score value into the label's property. So in other words, the first thing we want to do is go over to viewController.h. And again, I'm a little lazy, so I'm just going to copy this. All right. And I want another UI label, but instead of target label, I want this one to be score label. All right, so that's the first thing that you should do. Go over to BullsEye viewController.h and add this line of code. All right. All right. Then they tell you to go back to the .m file, bottom of the page. And under your update labels, that routine that we wrote that was update labels, that's right here, we're going to have another line in here. So again, I'm just going to do a Command C for copy and a Command V to paste. All right. So this time I'm going to be updating the score label. All right, so if you'd please do that. It's the code that's on the bottom of page 79 in the book. All right, we got just a little bit more to go, and then that's going to be it for the period today. Again, I'm going to try to give you some time so you can catch up if you're behind. So add that line, please, to update labels right there. Again, especially if you're not a great typist, I really recommend you start getting used to just using the Command C to copy and the Command V to paste. And then make your changes accordingly. The other thing, what's the other thing we have to do? Nobody even said anything to me on this. If you look up on the screen here, all right, we've got score and we got round, right? Don't you think we better hook those things up? All right. So again, I'm going to click on score here. I'm again going to go over, the connections inspector is already open. I'm going to click on here, hold down on my control key, drag, and let go. And I want that to be score label. All right. And I don't even know if I've got mine set up for my round. I think they have us do that next. That's on the middle of page 79. Sorry, I was bad not saying that to you. Make sure that you did that. So we're on page 80. We've got to do the bottom, all of page 80, all of page 81, and the top of page 82. Then we're done for the period. All right, and it's 10-2. I think in 10 minutes we can handle that. That's a couple pages. So the author says we want to add another variable in here to our .m file. We've got current value, we've got target value, we've got score, and now we want to add round. All right, so we're going to add this. I mean, it's pretty much doing the same thing. We're going to add this. We're going to go back to the .h file, and we're going to add the controller. All right, then we're going to go to our connections inspector, and we're going to add the connection to it. That's pretty much it up until this point. So again, I've done that. I'm going to go over the .h file. I'm going to add another property. This is round label. And the author says on the top of page 81, don't forget to make those connections. All right, so I'm going to go back to my storyboard. I'm going to click on the round like I've got it right there. Again, on new referencing outlet, hold down on control, drag down, let go, and there's round label. And then finally, I want to go in, I want to update my update labels routine. And I want to change my start new round method. If you can all just stop for a second and please go to page 81. Everybody, please just stop for a second and go to page 81 of the handout. So make sure you get this under the start new round. Again, plus equals, for some reason it doesn't appear that this supports plus plus, but the plus equals works just fine. So why are we doing that?
So it updates and brings up the next round.
Right? But there's even a little bit more of that. Remember when we set it originally, because we set it up at the top, right? So what is its value? If we set it up at the top of the program and we didn't initialize it, what value does it get? 0. When we first start, we don't want it to say we're in round 0. We want it to say we're in round 1. That's why we're saying the plus equal 1 right there under start new round. So whether it's the beginning of the game or if we're just starting a new round, we're always going to be incrementing the round. So the first time we go through it, it'll call start new round. So our first round will be round 1.
So
All right.
when you give the label property value 1, that doesn't do that?
We didn't give it a property value of 1. When we created it up above,
We did.
oh, you were, it's considered poor programming practice to do that and initialize it there.
Okay.
All right. So that should be everything, and we're up to page 82. So again, if you all just stop for a second, you don't have to look up here, but if you all just stop for a second, according to the handout, all right, right now we're on we're on about part 4, they call it here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get online and I'm going to print out the BullsEye View Controller.h and the BullsEye View Controller.m up through part 4 and give your group a copy, their group a copy, your group a copy, and your group a copy. And if yours isn't working, you might be able to look. I mean, if you didn't make a connection, you're going to have to go back and make that connection. All right? But otherwise, you can at least look at the code and see if your code jives with the code in the book to that point. Does that make sense? All right, then we'll pick it up on Wednesday under the polishing the game part. Okay? That's all that I had for today. See, when you look at mine now, if you look up on the screen here, every other time I run this, it doesn't break. But notice what's happening. It says, see how close you can get to 18. Well, that's got to be down here someplace, right? So if I click hit me, it says I got 87 points. But boom, notice what it doesn't do. My score is screwed up, and my round is screwed up. So I'm going to have to look at mine and see if I can figure out what the problem is also. All right?
Round isn't probably wired up.
I thought I wired it up. Again, that's possible.
I remember seeing you wire it up, Jeff, but you go
It says right there, round label, BullsEye View Controller. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. All right? So I'm going to look at mine just like you're looking at yours and see if I can figure out what the problem
Ours
is.
works perfect.
Yours works? Does yours work, Kelly?
Yep, yep.
All right. And I think you were a little bit behind, Laura, but hopefully you'll be able to catch up then during this time. All right, so again, if you guys do want to go on or start going on your own, I'd recommend that rather than just starting to do stuff, I would at least read the next few pages, like through around page 100,
I think we should
and then try to
keep
implement it.
doing it like we have been in this class.
Well, then I'll just, like I said, what I want to do, though, is I want to try to get mine so it works.
Oh, sure.
You know, that's all.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm going to, so right here, I'm going to go and print out every group a copy. And here's all the code up through page 80 in the book. There's really not a lot of code.
Jeff, for the code for the chip calculators that we didn't get finished, did you have that one done, or?
Yeah, I put it out there the other day. It's either under Thursday, last Thursday or last Tuesday. It's called, there's one, the last one is out there. It says tip calculator. That's all.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Which one is it in like the X one or the?
No, just click the one that says tip calc. And it's the view controller. Those are the two. But if you want to run that one, or not from that machine, of course, but if you want to run, just copy the whole folder over and then just double click the Xcode proj file and then you should run it. It should work.
So I'm signing on here. And that one. We should be able to. Can't get to your H drive on Mac, right?
If you don't look up here on the screen, I've got my book lists for spring. They're up here. Not on there, of course you can't see it from there. Well, I'll unhook this one and hook up the other one, and then you'll be able to see it. So hold on a sec.